Edwin Lutyens, his family came from Europe and settled in London. And he was the last of 14 children or something. But he was a very sickly child. So he never went to school. He was educated at home by his elder brother and sister. But he had prodigious talent, a creative talent. And when you're passionate by something, you learn it better than you do. Like, I'm not an architect. I'm often introduced as an architect because my work is connected to restoration for reuse. I take old buildings, yes, and turn them around. So he also, but then he did study eventually when he grew up because, you know, his legs became stronger. He couldn't play, etc. And his health did trouble him even while he was working in Delhi in the heat. You know, he had dysentery, you know, and he fought that. So he was not a very, very strong person, but he got married to Emily Lutyens, and Emily was the daughter of Lord Lytton. And Lord Lytton was the first Governor General of India. At one point, when Calcutta was becoming very argumentative, problematic, revolutionary, because, you know, the Bengalis had been educated. So they started to fight for their rights, demand them, take the government to court. They thought that it's better to go to a little more innocent area and impress them. And so they chose Delhi because Delhi has always been the seat of power. There are, you know, actually there are 12 cities of Delhi. I don't know why people always say 7. And New Delhi was to be the 12th. So when this plan was made, it was kept terribly secret from everybody. Only the Governor General, the King Emperor, and the Secretary of State knew about this. The King Emperor writes that he didn't even tell his wife because he says ladies tend to fritter away what you've told them to hide. So, yes. So,
well, you object, but
I know you'll object.
Nevertheless,
I'm not saying it. It's said by the King Emperor. He said that, you know, they can't keep a secret, so that's allowed. So then what happened was, but of course, the Governor General talked to his wife, and the wife talked to the son-in-law, and their son-in-law was Edwin Lutyens. Edwin Lutyens was a completely, not completely unknown. He had done a few houses country houses for English people, and was known because of the society in which he roamed. He knew the gentry of England, and he made a few houses for them. But as it happened, he had trained for 6 years in the office of Herbert Baker. Herbert Baker was much more senior to him, had a fabulous reputation, and had designed the capital of Pretoria in South Africa, which was the great rage because it had scale, it had pillars, and so on. And today, when we look at Rashtrapati Bhavan, what was then called Great Place, which is now called Vijay Chowk, and look at the pillars of South Block and North Block, which are designed by Herbert Baker, it echoes the same Pretoria of that time. So because he knew him and had worked under him, he writes an innocent letter to Baker to say that the commissioning of capital in New Delhi there is offing, I hear of it. Shall we enter the competition together? So Baker then is full of work because he's at the top of his career. He said, okay, let us. So they enter as Baker, Lutyens, and party.
Interesting.
And then when they visit this place or when they're chosen, Baker gets, 3 times the daily allowance that he gets because one is the boss and one is an assistant. Right. So at the early stages, he plays that game. He plays second fiddle, and the big commission is then given to them. They set up office here, and the expenses of the office again, because these are all things to show the relative status of people. Baker was much higher, so he took much more money for running his office, and Edwin Lutyens accepted less because the North Block and the South Block are designed by Baker. That the Great Place is designed by him, and but by and by, because Lutyens was very manipulative, he managed to edge him out. And eventually, Herbert Baker has a breakdown, nervous breakdown, and he leaves India. And then Edwin Lutyens gets more free flow to do what he wants. And so we know of him more than we know of Baker. And there's much more to it. For example, if you look at the different aspects of a city, you know, since we're talking about the architect, we had been taught, our education had been taught, you know, to look away from the greatness of our past, to be ashamed of it, even if it could be. So, and become impressed by European architecture. So if you look at 19th and 20th century architecture, the great grand palaces of the Maharajas, you will find nothing. You know, Padmanabhapuram, for example, is 1757 or something. It's just when the black hole happens in Calcutta, that's when Padmanabhapuram comes to an end. So, or we have Stoke Palace, which is up in the north in Leh, which again predates the British. After the coming of the British, all the monumental buildings are European because we by then got a complex that we are not sufficient.
We're not sophisticated enough.
Yeah, so and to a people where we have such extraordinary architecture. If you look at, you know, the architecture of the Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas, the Cholas, you know, Hoysalas, everything. Each of it is so extraordinary. So, but Lutyens arrives here and he says that India has no architecture at all.
Unbelievable.
So the Lord Hardinge, who was then Governor General, for whom I have actually much more respect than I would have for Edwin Lutyens, he says to him, please travel and see. So he goes around, he comes back, and from every, you know, he sees the Taj Mahal and he says architecture begins where the Taj ends.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.